Hello, my name is Margaret Adele, and welcome to a random discussion that I am very excited to do. Today we are talking about how shifter romances are supreme. Now, I've been thinking about this for a while because shifter romances have gotten me through some pretty difficult times. Some of you may know, if you watched some of my videos, that my husband and I are foster parents, and last March, well, this March actually, it just feels like an entire eon ago, we got our very first placement. Between the call and her arriving, we had an hour and a half to prepare. So my day turned sideways real quick, and the very next day we had a bunch of appointments and things, so I knew that my life was going to get very crazy for a couple days, but I didn't want to give up reading. So I picked a genre that I knew would give me all of the fun melodrama without the tragedy or the struggle that some more literary books had. And so I picked Wildfire Griffin by Zoe Chant. And ever since then, I've been thinking about how awesome shifter romances are and how they're looked down upon and how this should stop. So first things first, let's talk about what a shifter romance actually is. A shifter romance is a story in which the main purpose of the plot is the romance between two characters, at least one of whom can shift into a different creature. Now, this might be a regular animal like a bear and sometimes a wolf, or something more mystical like a dragon or a phoenix or a griffin or what have you. Now, these are different from werewolf romances in that there's not really an emphasis on pack or alphas or who's subservient to who or who's in charge of whom. Like, that whole hierarchy doesn't really exist in shifter romances. There are usually some sort of found family, which I love. And in a lot of cases with these shifter romances, it follows that kind of series format that a lot of indie romance books do, or a lot of romance series in general, really, in which every book is one couple falling in love, but it kind of builds on a bigger story. And what I love about these is that these stories aren't just like falling in love. Like, it's not just a matchmaking service. It's big. Like, it's giant things. Like, in the Fur United Coalition by Eve Longley's series, there is this evil mastermind that's kidnapping predator shifters to experiment on them. And in each book, you learn a little bit more about who that mastermind is. Or in the Mystic Bayou series by Molly Harper, there's an emphasis on some humans actually turning into shifters and what's happening and what if people find out about it, and humans getting closer and closer to discovering shifters exist. Because in most of these stories, shifters are hidden to the outside world, or very few humans actually know about them. So these plots are always gigantic and melodramatic, but you can pretty much be sure that a happily ever after is always guaranteed. And that is a big thing with indie romance in general. It's kind of a funny thing you see often, is that if you go and read a synopsis for an indie romance book, they will often tell you somewhere HEA guaranteed. It's such a stipulation in indie romance, as a matter of fact, that in some cases they will actually warn you. Like, this is a series. They will not end up together at the end just yet. You'll have to wait. And part of me is like, really? You're gonna spoil it? But the other half of me is like, no, that's why you read a romance. You read a romance for the happy, fuzzy feelings. And I know a lot of people get really annoyed at the setup of, in each book, a different couple falls in love. But I actually love that because half the time, I already loved the character that I met first in a different book. Because usually what happens is, the first book, two characters fall in love, and then the next book is on a side character. And usually, if they're big enough to be a major part of the first couple books, you could pretty much be guaranteed that they are going to get their chance at a romance later on. And I love it. I also love it that because they're still focusing on the same group of people, in later books you get to see, like, the continuing romance of earlier couples. So say the first couple to fall in love in the first book, by like books 3 or 4, they're married or they're pregnant or whatever. There's movement in the background of couples that you fell in love with in the first couple books moving forward, and I'm a big fan. There's also one thing that I am a big fan of, although I would like to see it done a little bit differently, at least once or twice, and that is this kind of true mate motif. And this is basically, it's basically the imprinting from the Twilight series, but done a lot less creepy because both people doing this are legal adults, no babies. But anyways, usually they look at each other and they just know. Although my favorite is, it's actually fairly common in shifter romances for only the shifter to actually know. Like, they look at this person's eyes and they're like, the one, but then the other, like the human character, is completely oblivious, and so now the shifter basically has to like woo the human character to convince them of what they already know, which it's really funny watching them like run around with chickens with their heads cut off. A lot of these books are also very tongue-in-cheek. They know what they are. I mean, again, the Furry United Coalition by Yves Langlois, that's literally the title of the like organization within that series. It's the Furry United Coalition, FUC, and they pronounce it the exact way you think they pronounce it. It is so aware of exactly what it is and exactly what it's trying to be, and it's so tongue-in-cheek. I absolutely love all of the puns. It's not trying to be anything more than what it is, and I love it. I also love that in a lot of these stories, there's actually a large amount of diversity in it. Specifically in the Wildfire Griffin series, I believe its full title is like Firefighters, Shifters, Wildfire, or something like that. I'll have it up here. But there is so much diversity in the kinds of characters that come through. You have characters of different, races or different ethnicities coming through, but you also have things like a character with autism or anxiety disorder and ADD, and I loved all of that mix up and all of that like fun, how does this affect their shifter powers, and how does this affect who they are as people, and does this affect the actual relationship? And I also just in general love that the first book in that series had an autistic protagonist, and how it actually like helped her connect with the shifters better because of their heightened senses and getting easily overwhelmed. But in general, I just love how these stories can get so dramatic with third act kidnappings, and I know that not everyone is a fan of the third act kidnapping. I like it when it's supremely over the top, and in some cases you actually do see the man getting kidnapped in some of these, which is just so much better. In some cases, the human might turn into a shifter, but for the most part, they tend to stay human. That's not really a requirement for me, so I don't really mind too much. But in general, I see a lot of these kind of books being like looked down upon, and really, romance in general is very much looked down upon, especially adult romance, because I see so many people writing it off. I remember I've seen tweets where someone was like, I don't want to read adult romances. I don't care about Susan's office life or whatever. And first of all, if that's your attitude towards adult romance, you have never read an adult romance book in your life, or you have only read what was on like your grandma's shelves, because you pick up any Harlequin romance and it's like FBI agents and terrorists, and like it is the most melodramatic, over-the-top plots. But if you go into it wanting that, it works. I don't necessarily want something super serious in those moments, and those books, specifically the Wildfire Shifter series, got me through a very stressful time when I could not guarantee that my mind would be able to focus on anything that in-depth. And most shifter romances aren't trying to be more than that. They're trying to be fun, really melodramatic plots that give you the warm fuzzies at the end. And sometimes I want that. I don't need this giant, inner theme on life or big themes. Sometimes you just want reading that's purely fun, and shifter romances often give that. Now, I will say there are certain ways I would like them to be done a little bit differently, because the true mate trope is so related to like having babies. It's such a big thing, and having kids is always a gigantic thing in shifter romances. And I would love to see more emphasis on like queer romances, or I would love to see like a true mate look in the eye no with queer characters, like characters of the same sex. Like that would be fantastic. But in general, I still love them. They're still my favorites. I am literally like regularly checking to see if the next one of the Wildfire Firefighters Shifter series has come out. It has not, and its publication date on the website has already passed, and I am getting antsy. So I'll have to switch to some others. But do you like this kind of series? Please let me know down in the comments below if you're a big fan of the shifter romances. And again, it's shifter, not werewolves. I do not like werewolf romances. I do not like the sheer amount of emphasis on a man dominating a woman in those romances. Not a fan. Do not like alpha werewolves. But I love shifter romances. So, okay. I think I'm finally done. I got this all out of my system, but thank you so much for watching. And with nothing else to say, I hope you have a wonderful day and a marvelous tomorrow.